Well, I'm going to say just screw the rest of that quote from Gerard Malanga, and I'm going to move on to another one.
Fuck that guy. He was long-winded.
I mean, he was important and all, but I said the important stuff. All right, you've heard of Ultraviolet, right? One of the superstars.
Ultraviolet, not violent.
Did I not? I thought I said Violet.
Man, I'm going to reach across the bar and make it ultraviolet.
Okay, all right.
Hey everyone, it's Elliot.
And Todd. Welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar, an ongoing conversation about pop culture and iconic design.
Today we continue talking about the formation of the pop art scene.
And the introduction of its greatest superstar.
He made the lowbrow highbrow.
And along the way agitated a lot of people.
So let's raise our glasses to the master manipulator himself back here in the bar.
So, I have a question for you, okay?
No, I'm not busy for dinner.
Let's have drinks first, okay?
Oh,
what do you think?
Yeah, let's
All
go
right.
from there. See how the evening goes. Okay.
Fresh. Okay, so I thought about this.
For a change.
Okay, thanks, yeah. All right. If I said name maybe 2 or 3 things that you think represented Andy Warhol, what would come to your mind first without even thinking about it? Because you're good at that.
Campbell's soup cans would be the very first thing.
Same. First one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's the funny thing about today's episode is we're going to highlight the failure of the Campbell's Soup show. I'll get into that a little bit, but shit gets wild because of what happened after that. So I think you're going to dig some of the stories I dug up.
You know, I have a theory on why the show wasn't more successful.
Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
What is your theory? Because it was not good at the time, or people just weren't ready?
I think they probably didn't have a hot bar serving soup.
Okay, that does make sense. If we were doing the Campbell's Soup show, we would give out soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, wouldn't we?
Oh man, it should be a Campbell's Soup and Velveeta. That's where he really dropped the ball, I think.
He really could have gotten Velveeta on board with that.
Well.
So the thing about our visit to the bar today is it's going to get trippier. And as you look around, Elliot, our bar is full of some very colorful characters, some of the most colorful ones you've seen. So let me do a real quick recap from our last episode. The previous episodes, we talked about how the pop artists developed. They were all sort of, kind of connected in Greenwich Village, but not really. The environment was ripe with advertising, consumerism, money, and throw in a dash of distaste for the highbrow intellectualism that was sweeping the country at the time.
So basically, where we record each episode, that's basically the scene.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You nailed it.
Okay.
More alcohol probably involved, but
like now or then.
Yeah. Well, yeah, both.
Oh.
But oddly, this ambitious commercial illustrator, who was an odd, ambitious commercial illustrator, was told to paint what he loved. And what came out of that were pictures of money, Coca-Cola, and Campbell's Soup.
Delicious.
As you've mentioned already.
Yeah.
That's sort of like what Andy Warhol's known for. And then, as we talked about, we went back and forth on sort of, did Campbell's Soups like it? Did they not like it? It was sort of a love-hate thing. But then things got really interesting for Andy, the factory, and the world. And we got introduced to the Warhol superstars. and how they fed Andy's ambitions to create this art and commercial studio, film set, party scene.
That's a lot. Yeah. To use your term from a previous episode, when you were describing the evolution of things like popular movies, music, TV in the 60s, you used the word, I love this word, untethered.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me think of the Goodyear blimp getting loose and wreaking havoc, like on a very
flying
windy
like
day.
all the,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like going places it shouldn't be, like over like nudist beaches and stuff like that.
Wait, it's
They're
not
like,
supposed
what
to
the
go
hell? Well, I mean, they may, the people on the beach may not, but yeah. So as the factory was getting started, it wasn't really untethered at first. I mean, it was a hardcore workspace, but much like Lord of the Flies, shit got real.
Wow. Okay.
But, okay.
That went dark fast.
Yeah. In the previous episode, I talked about the Campbell Soup Can exhibition at the Ferris Gallery as Andy's sort of fine art start. Do you remember that?
Yeah, this was, like we already touched on, the place that likely wasn't serving soup.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I remember this because you said the show coincided, and this was great, file this under you can't make this up, coincided with the opening of the first Walmart, right?
I knew that caught your ear. Yes. How beautiful is that? The universe is playing jokes on us.
Yeah, so we loosely talked about this last time, but it was really quick. So tell the listeners a little bit more about this. What was or maybe is the Ferris Gallery? Because that's unfamiliar to me.
Good question. And this show plays a huge role in making Andy Warhol, although it doesn't seem like it on the surface. I will expand. The Ferris Gallery was around. It started in 1957 in L.A. It's no longer around, but it was seen as a community of these contemporary, unknown artists. It was formed by these two guys, two artists named Ed Kienholz and Walter Hopps. It was based right on La Cienega Boulevard in West Hollywood and really did kind of specialize in up-and-coming artists, which most of them were California artists that sort of lived that culture of surfing, jazz, poetry, motorcycles in and around Venice Beach and Santa Monica.
Sure, yeah, that SoCal street culture we know and love.
So that kind of sounds a little beat, doesn't it?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, motorcycles and poetry. Anyway, one of the partners, Ed Kienholz, left pretty soon after it opened. I want to say 58, something like that, 59. He sold his share to a guy named Irving Bloom. And Bloom was put in charge of operations and really put the Ferris Gallery on the map.
So this was a guy who was also in the scene in some way, and
he was probably a little bit more experienced at being a curator, had a little bit better eye. He certainly would become renowned later on for what he did. But if you notice, like the dates and the timing there is kind of this obvious metaphor. The original owners represented the Beats, and Bloom kind of came out of nowhere, had a massive role in developing the pop scene.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he was sophisticated with not only how to run a gallery, but also how to promote it and how to find talent.
Yes. And he was passionate about it. All right, so we've already talked about that the show opened in July and coincided with the first Walmart opening. And by all accounts, that show with the Campbell soup cans at the Ferris Gallery was a bust. If you remember, I said they had 5 commitments of the 32 paintings, and the gallery director, Irving Bloom, decided to not sell those paintings or buy them back because he wanted to keep all of them together. And
right, I remember that.
So, yeah. So, that would prove to be prophetic. But the date that I want us to focus on is the date that the show closed, which is August 4th, 1962. And as I said, the show was a bust. Andy Warhol and Campbell soup cans should have been lost to history. But August 4th, 1962 kind of made something there.
Yeah, I need to stop you for a second, because obviously if we're sitting here talking about both of these things now, Andy Warhol wasn't forgotten. He only grew.
No, yeah.
And, the Ferris Gallery, it sounds like, even though it's no longer in business, it continued for a while.
Right.
So is there a story? You always come up with a story.
There's always a story. You know that. Okay. August 4th, 1962. That's the day that the show in L.A. closed with kind of a whimper. And it's the very same day that Andy Warhol started painting portraits of Marilyn Monroe, because that's the day she died. She was found, she committed suicide with the drugs. And Irving Bloom called Andy and said, "You ought to do some Marilyn Monroe stuff." So he did. He did a lot. And to say it took off after that is really an understatement. So the death of Marilyn Monroe really has us knowing Andy Warhol as who Andy Warhol is now.
Okay. Well, this stands up. I mean, this makes sense. This guy was obsessed with fame, as we've talked about.
And glamour.
Yeah, and she was both of those things. Totally iconic.
And tragedy, too, remember?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this tragic figure. And then even when she was alive, I think she sort of had that hanging over her. And then when she dies from suicide, that only cements the legend, I guess.
Yep.
And then, this guy, of course, later on started Interview Magazine. So that was also a hub for celebrity culture. So was his idea from the beginning to be this sort of, this sort of art world kingmaker, I guess? Like, what was his game here?
It's hard to say. I think, as we've talked about, he was super ambitious. Well, I've thought about this a little bit. I think there were three major factors in Andy's philosophy, point of view, his outlook in the world, that I think moved him at the forefront of the movement. So bear with me, if you will. Let me hit on a couple of these and see what you think.
All right, bang on, my friend.
All right, first one, obvious. He was obsessed with fame, right? Both his and others. Yeah, and you're right. He started Interview Magazine, and that was exactly the reason. By all accounts, he worked hard to establish himself, not only as a successful illustrator, but to be taken seriously as an artist. And as a matter of fact, he would say he was not into drugs, yet he took prescription diet pills daily. And the one he took, it's called, not that you can find it, but it's called Obitrol. It's an amphetamine, a predecessor to Adderall. And he did that because it allowed him to work more.
Oh, there you go. Gotcha.
He took diet pills to work more.
So it's a quote-unquote diet pill. Sounds like it was in actuality speed.
It was
something
speed,
like that. Yeah. So kids, if you need to hyper-focus, if you want to get more work done, please don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs. No.
Yeah.
So back to Andy. I believe he felt like he had something to prove. If you remember from the previous episode, people called him Raggedy Andy.
That's right.
And he was looking for that community with folks like Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns. And you remember I talked about how they pushed him away last time. And even the world's Beaumont creator, even Truman Capote, called him a loser.
Yeah, Beaumont's and bomb thrower.
yeah. Bon vivant and gadfly. Yeah. So, I feel like he had something to prove. But, he was a little bit prophetic when you think about fame, and particularly in the 21st century. He turned ordinary people into celebrities, and like decades before Facebook or YouTube or reality TV, he knew that people needed to be famous. And not only be famous, but not really be famous for anything other than being themselves.
Sure. Oh, okay. So this makes me think, well, I don't want to jump too far ahead in the plot here, but I know he surrounded himself with, as you mentioned at the top of the episode, some quote-unquote colorful people.
Yes.
And so I would think that if you're going to be famous for being just yourself, the more colorful you are normally, well, I'll use normally in quotes, that's likely to be, at the very least, it's going to stimulate him. He'll find these people interesting.
Good observation. Yes. Yeah. So fame was a big driver, I think. The second factor I think that really drove him was his love of the lowbrow,
Yeah. I don't even think, we call it lowbrow now. I'm not sure it was called lowbrow at the time, right?
Yeah. I don't think so. I think it was like, commonplace or everyday.
Boorish, loudish, uncouth, right?
I like this game. Let's keep it going. Work a day, mundane.
Sure. Run of the mill, right? Ordinary, routine.
Vernacular.
Yeah, humdrum.
Yeah. See, it's like we're playing Password.
Or, take that, Roger.
So, it's well documented that he recorded everyday conversations and he recorded himself and others eating lunch and sleeping. And
and he was making art by having his, we'll refer to them as assistants, maybe some of these colorful characters. They were making art by peeing on it.
Well, I guess that is sort of the ultimate in personal expression, isn't it?
Oh, man, I express myself all the time.
Okay. Let's keep that to yourself. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I don't want to get kicked out of the bar.
Yeah. So, okay. So in that vernacular stuff, his contemporaries were using the commercial stuff as a departure point, and kind of moving on from there. We talked about that with Rauschenberg. But Andy celebrated the beauty of the commercial stuff as is. Mm-hmm. And in turn, it would prove to irritate art critics and tickle the mainstream, which is exactly what he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost a numbers game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Todd, speaking of feeling a tickle, I think I might need to powder my nose, as the saying goes.
Are you going to go make some art?
Maybe. Do you have some new work in the bathroom I could have a look at?
All right. We'll leave it there for a moment, and we'll be back shortly. Hi. We want to take a moment to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, we have an archive of topics ranging from the Olympics to movie posters.
Think Ghostbusters.
Iconic images.
Think Bigfoot.
Punk music.
The Ramones.
Saturday morning cartoons.
The Pink Panther.
And failed products like OK Soda. Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com for full episode notes and visuals, the latest blog content, and to sign up for our newsletter.
Follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Find the links on our website or search using the phrase Two Designers Walk Into a Bar.
Most importantly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find podcasts like this.
And tell a friend about us. Send them a link to our podcast from your listening platform of choice.
And if you're inclined, buy our merchandise. Stickers, coasters, magnets, t-shirts. We're designers. We make good stuff, and it helps support the show.
Get in touch. Use the contact form on our website or send an email to hello@twodesignerswalkintoabar.com.
We read every message we get. Honest.
And we're available for speaking gigs. Email us to learn more.
Okay, now, back to the bar. All right, let me move on here. Third big factor that helped Andy Warhol find his niche was actually the times themselves. Like, we've talked about this when we were introducing this series on pop art. It was the explosion of commercialism. Remember, I talked about in the decade of 1950 to 1960, it went from like 10% of the homes having a TV to 90% having TVs.
Yep.
And advertising exploded. That ran head first into the social unrest of the 60s. It was the emergence of alternative lifestyles. They were being more accepted. Drugs and mind expansion. We've talked about that.
Yep.
Traditionally underrepresented communities, those colorful characters, were now starting to be seen, right? And Andy loves seeing them, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously he found novelty in these folks. So it sounds like what you're saying is time was right and Warhol found himself in the right place.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So if you recall, maybe watching a couple episodes of Mad Men, the 1960s New York, that was a place where business and art really exploded. It kind of actually exploded together. So we see the idea that advertising should be less about arguing the virtues of a product and more about having some sort of emotional connection to it. In the 60s, that was a really new idea. So essentially at that moment, we became citizens last and consumers first. Ads were works of art and works of art were ads.
Yeah, this idea of quote-unquote building your brand.
Right. So it was the emotion, not like, up until then, people were like, Coke helps you lose weight, or, blah, blah, blah. It was like all these things. Cigarettes taste good, and
Right.
It wasn't like about the emotion of it.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in the right place at the right time. And the last factor that I think drove Andy to make the factory was his desire to disconnect from reality. What the hell does that mean? That's what you're asking, right?
Well, I mean, what it says to me, because of his being so shy, that he basically was sort of creating his own world and only let the people he wanted in it.
Yeah, exactly. And he literally worked all the time. The day Marilyn died, he began doing her portraits. And within a few months, he was having his first solo show at the Stable Gallery. And all of the Marilyns sold out. So
totally
quite a
opposite,
contrast.
Yeah, from the Campbell's soup cans.
Yeah, which was like, 6 months earlier, right? The
wow.
Campbell's
Okay,
soup
so
can.
it was really quick.
Yeah. So Marilyn died August 4th, 1962. He got to work on lots of Marilyns. This show at the Stable Gallery was near the end of 62, like end of November, and everything sold out.
Now, is the Stable Gallery, was it New York? Or was it?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
So I
in
wonder
New
if
York.
that had something to do with it, too.
Yeah, I think so, because he was known, obviously, as a commercial artist in New York. And, I mean, we can talk about the philosophy of comparing consumer products to celebrities all day long. But the reality is, I think people wanted more pictures of Marilyn and fewer pictures of soup.
Even as ubiquitous, I would say, as Marilyn Monroe was at the time, it was still easier to find soup. You could look in your kitchen cupboard and find soup.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when I said he wanted to disconnect from reality, he was quoted as saying one time, "I want to be a machine," which is super interesting given his love of repetition and the manner he worked at the factory. He orchestrated, and assistants started doing the work with him, then by him, and ultimately they did the work for him.
Sure. But he was still directing them, though. Like, he was
Yeah.
coming up with themes and...
Yeah.
Okay.
He was becoming less hands-on, and, as I said, repetition. So, you think, okay, let's paint a bunch of Brillo boxes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we're going to do 100 of those, so start doing them, guys.
But what's interesting, because thinking about this, just thinking out loud for a minute, if you think about his commercial art background, as you rise up the ranks in commercial art, you are more valued for your ideas than you are for your technical output, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if his fine art arc was echoing sort of what he was seeing in the advertising world as well.
Could be. And, he certainly worked with a lot of collaborators in his commercial art. So it wasn't a foreign concept for him. If we're going to be a little philosophical about that too, I think he saw us as more than just our bodies. It became how we crafted our image. And like you said, building our brand. He saw our image as being stronger than our body. And it was all part of this big sort of media machine.
Yeah, and it all sort of feeds on itself.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think you're exactly right in terms of predicting social media and just the crush of information that we're facing today. He did, it almost, I think, was like he didn't know how it would manifest itself, but he knew the manifestation was inevitable.
Yeah. He knew we would be really interested in the ordinary people doing nothing, which is pretty mind-boggling for the time, I think.
Yeah. And today we take it for granted.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears here because I'm starting to have another. I want to get back on track here. Okay.
All right. So those are all my factors. So that's the philosophical part of today's discussion.
Todd, we've strayed into the highbrow, and you know that you and I are strangers there.
Yes. Yeah. It's a foreign zip code.
We're going to get kicked out of the top floor of the library. Okay. So let's get back to, speaking of buildings, the factory itself, because I remember you had talked about in a prior episode that he had moved out of his apartment was like overrun with all his art. He was living with his mom. He's like, I got to get the hell out of here. I got to do something. Yeah. So he finds this abandoned firehouse, and he's in this firehouse. So is that the factory? I mean, when does this kind of start? What was this ribbon cutting?
No, you're right. You're right. He made a deal with to move into the abandoned firehouse, but he was only there a few months in 1963, and it was not the factory. He did have an assistant that worked with him, but he was asked to move out, and I don't know. I never found out why. My guess is it was abandoned for a reason. So they're like, you probably shouldn't be here.
Well, also, didn't he get the rent for, he got the firehouse for a song?
150, yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So he kind of quickly found a midtown loft space on the 5th floor at 231 East 47th Street in Midtown Manhattan. And that would actually become the first factory.
Oh, okay.
And he moved in there in January of 64, literally a couple weeks before the Beatles would land in New York City on the Ed Sullivan Show. What a time, right?
Okay. Yeah, a lot was going on for sure.
Okay, I'm digressing on that one. But let's put a pin in that date, because with the success of the Maryland show, things really started to change. Okay,
so I've heard two things associated with Warhol. There's the factory, but then there's also the silver factory. Is this the same thing?
You're right.
Two different things?
It is. Well, the first one was originally called the Silver Factory.
Okay.
Due to they covered everything in tinfoil and silver paint and broken mirrors.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So Andy's artist friend, a guy named Ray Johnson, took him to a haircutting party at Billy Name's apartment. Billy Name was not named Billy Name. He was Billy Lennox at the time.
Man, so haircutting party?
Yeah. Yes, Elliot, haircutting party. Why are you looking at your watch?
Oof. Well, I just realized I'm late for my toupee adjustment. So, would it be possible to stick a pin in this conversation and come back to the bar soon to wrap it up?
Yeah, we could stick a pin in your toupee also. And, we'll come back next time to the bar. Please join us as we continue talking about Andy Warhol, New York City, and the Silver Factory scene.
I'll probably be wearing a hat.